Hi guys, what is going on, and welcome back to another video on Conqueror's Blade. So today, finally happening, we are finally reviewing the Iron Reapers. These guys have been a long time coming. They're kind of like the OG, the original tier 5 infantry unit. Well, they are the original tier 5 infantry unit. But for some reason, they're one that I've actually never ever got around to reviewing before. And yeah, really one of the last tier 5 units I've finished leveling up. I think that's in part because originally unlocking them used to be a lot harder. You used to have to complete significantly more to actually get to them. You used to have to finish all the Imperial Pike Guard tree, all the Palace Guard tree, including all the defensive stat buffs and everything, and all the Imperial Shield Guard tree before you could actually even unlock these Iron Reapers. But they used to be a lot stronger back in the day, and this is sort of before seasons even started. And yeah, they're actually really quite crazy, but they got very heavily nerfed, and they have never really ever been able to recover. And as a unit, they're not really used that much today because they're a unit that kind of struggles to be really very effective. They're quite situational, and they've really been outclassed by a lot of the more recent seasonal stuff. So, kind of what is the unit all about? Well, they're supposed to be all about being super tanky. And I guess in that capacity, they actually fulfill that quite well. They have 12,500 hit points, which is obviously quite impressive, quite decent. But when you combine that with the 1,200 piercing defense and 1,000 slashing defense, and the fact that depending on which line you go down, i.e. if you go down the bottom, here it is, they actually get a self-heal as well. Quite sure why that's not showing up in a unit order box, but they do. You'll see in battle, they do get a self-heal. Makes them a really tanky unit. But they are slow. Movement speed of 3.8 is really quite painful when you're trying to move any sort of distance across the map. They're only a 16 model unit. When you compare that sort of half the size of a unit of stalwarts or something like that. And that does have an impact. They do make use of blunt damage, assuming you're making use of the flail. You're pretty much always going to be using the flail in most situations. Very occasionally, you could argue against lighter armoured units that the sword could be worthwhile using, but realistically, just use the flail. And the fact that, even though they do blunt damage, their charge is damaging, don't get me wrong. It's good, but it's not great, and it's certainly not good enough to account for the leadership cost, the kit cost to maintaining these guys, and the painful movement speed that comes with it. And that's kind of the problem. Then on top of that, they have a painfully slow attack speed. You can slightly get around this by sort of Xing and Ving them, which is where you basically press X to force the unit forwards or to regroup back up, and then when you press V again, they should all simultaneously swing their flail because they basically come out of movement into attack mode, and so they start with a swing, basically like a way of forcing them to attack rather than waiting for their natural attack speed cooldown to occur, because otherwise they attack really slowly, and of course they get stunned and pushed around by other units in that time, which means that the odds of them actually attacking is pretty low, so they tend to lose very often in just sort of normal melee situations when they've not got the charge or you're not there to use the XV method to force them to attack. Elsewise, unit kit costs are of course expensive. 12,500 basically per kit means that these are quite expensive to run, but as is any tier 5 unit, so I suppose that's not all that surprising. Might as well get them topped up. Doctrine-wise, nothing really special going for them, at least not that I've decided for. Of course, we're using the flail, we're using the blunt damage, so I've thrown that on. I threw that decent rare piercing defense doctrine on just because I was kind of curious to see how high it would go. Obviously, over 1,200 is by and away the highest of any unit that I currently own. And then the extra damage to units and the extra damage to heroes, because I do find that while the charge damages units, it doesn't really push through, but it does tend to do quite a lot of damage to enemy heroes, and hopefully, as you saw from some of the clips at the start and some of the clips when we go into some of these battles, the charge actually seems to be more effective against enemy heroes than it does realistically against enemy units. But anyway, I think I've probably talked enough about these guys already, so let's hop ourselves into a battle and actually talk a little bit more about them and see what they are like in combat. So here we are, loading in on Hidden City, the map no one can find. Oh, it was a terrible joke. I'll leave. But Things are kicking off. The enemy have got the siege towers into place, just initially pushing up with some serfs and some domain pikes, but as more and more stuff is starting to get stacked on that siege tower, decide to call up the Reapers, call up the Armoured Guard, hopefully thinking that I might be able to get a charge in. Managed to avoid that trebuchet, which was kind of lucky, more luck than judgment really, but just waiting for that one to end, we do start to get shot by some of these enemy archers from behind us. But I don't really want to be chasing enemy range, that's not what this unit is about, they're so slow. But as our team pushes onto the tower, this seems like a good opportunity. I get on the tower, make sure the whole unit's on, and just go straight down. And this really plays into their hands. You know, luckily we managed to miss the Treb as well, which was a spot of luck. We basically get one hero kill, but basically clear out another enemy hero, so basically he gets shot by an enemy, a friendly archer and killed, and we get sort of 25 kills, something like that. That's where the Reapers actually do quite well, because you're funneling their charge into a very sort of confined environment, you know, i.e. that little run up the siege tower, and that really suits them quite nicely. But with that part of the wall cleared, I was thinking, one, there's some enemies starting to push down the bottom of these stairs, and I didn't know if anything was protecting our ranged around the supply point. And secondly, I was thinking that maybe we can get back up the stairs on the other side, particularly if we get some allied support, and we can start to threaten some of the enemy archers that are on that side of the wall. This poleaxe almost gets his away, but the short sword gets him locked down. But now we've got friendly support, I'm much happier to start to pressure these archers. Because if you try and tackle them on your own with these guys, you know, particularly if anything enemy reinforcements turn up or there's a couple of enemy heroes, you'll find Reapers actually rapidly start to have a really hard time. They are much better with a little bit of support around. But as we come up, you actually see kind of what I mean with this problem. I get the unit aimed in, go for the charge to try and rake along the back of the unit of archers, and I turn and deal with the short sword, managed to miss my ultimate. But you see, the archers can run almost quicker than my unit can charge. But thankfully, some of them stopped on the end, and we actually managed to land a little bit of the charge damage. But we then run into another unit of enemy Reapers. And this is what I mean when I say X and V. So I'm pushing the unit in, pressing V, and they all attack. Pushing the unit in, pressing V, and they all attack. Pushing the unit in, pressing V, and they all attack. So that's why we're able to overwhelm that unit of Reapers. And we don't really take any or very little amount of actual damage in that fight. Okay, you know, we had hero support and a bit of allied support. We'd almost certainly won if we hadn't done the X and V method. But that really helps in terms of making the unit a lot more effective. And that was something a lot of you guys said, you know, when we were playing on stream and stuff like that. So, you know, top kudos. That's not me being clever. That's you guys in the chat. But hopefully it helps everyone else who's using Reapers as well. But as A point's getting pressured more and more, we start to push in. Manage to grab ourselves another little hero kill there as we push through them. Really, again, what suits the unit really quite well. Charging into quite a clustered environment. And now we're just doing the same again. X and V, pushing the unit in, pressing V, and they get the fresh attacks, wipe out another enemy hero. That's our fourth hero kill now, I think, and we completely clear out the A point. And this is what the unit is quite decent at. But for me at least, I still think I would pick a unit of paladins over these guys in this sort of situation. Even though these guys are good, this is quite a niche situation for them that works so well against them. These Azaps then start to push in. But my charge comes off cooldown, and because they're so tightly clustered as they try to push their way into that narrow little corridor at the back of the gatehouse, actually my charge does quite a lot of damage to some of those Azaps. And yeah, we're actually able to wipe them out quite effectively, because Azaps are a unit that can be quite effective against sort of tackling Reapers, so I was quite pleased we were able to deal with them. And again, just using the X and V to keep pushing them through. And again, we've got the side secure. And now the A point, at least for now, is still in our control. Ideally, I was thinking about going back and healing up at the supply point. You know, the unit is pretty battered by this point. A couple of them in the red, it would be nice to get them back to health. But this is one of the big drawbacks of the Iron Reapers, is their speed. They are super slow and quite unlucky to get hit by that Treb, I think, there, but we got away with it without too badly. But yeah, they're such a slow unit. If I want to go all the way back to the supply point, you know, it's going to be minutes for me to get there, heal up, and then walk the unit back again. And by that point, I felt like there's a good chance the A point might have been lost, and I would kind of regret it, and I would be better off trying to make my stand, trying to push here. But now in a bit of a situation where we've got people or enemies starting to stack up on both siege towers, but not actually a decisive fight breaking out at either end. So in the end I decided it's better to counterattack and try and clear one side out, so then we've only got one direction to deal with. So just these pike militia on a tower. Obviously the Reapers do deal with them pretty fine. They push their way through quite effectively. We actually lose one of them, unfortunately, because they're quite low health. And we couldn't quite, unfortunately, get that poleaxe, and he fell down and he didn't actually die, which is kind of a shame. Would have been nice to get him locked in place. But it does mean, at least for now, temporarily, that side is clear. Now I can start to think about dealing with the quite large chunk of enemies that are gathering on the front. And they are pushing either side of this gatehouse. So you can see kind of my indecision. I was also waiting a little bit on my charge for cooldown, but in the end I felt I had to get in and try and protect the shield unit. We sort of get away with a little bit XMVing on these paladins. We do a bit of damage, but we start to get pressured quite heavily, and ultimately still not got my charge on cooldown as these stalwarts get round behind us. I try and counter-charge them because I thought I would have enough time to get a bit more speed built up in the charge, but it doesn't really happen for us, and unfortunately we get ourselves overwhelmed and killed quite quickly. But still, 135 unit kills and 4 hero kills shows the unit still has some potential to be actually an effective unit. You know, they can be good, but they are a little bit situational. They are painfully slow. With the fact that there's only 16 models, you know, yes, they are very tanky in that sense, but they get stunned by heroes quite easily. And when you start shooting with them with muskets or pavés, it doesn't really matter how much armour you've got. Their penetration far exceeds the defensive stats of the Reapers, and you're still going to die pretty quickly. And so that's kind of their drawback, really. I think that they once were a dominant unit, but they're really not in that place anymore. And even with the slight buffs they got at the start of Season 7, you know, they're still not in an amazing position. So there wouldn't be a unit I would recommend newer players certainly go for. If there's something you really want to unlock and you've sort of got a lot of the other sort of core meta units, then they're not necessarily something unplayable. They're certainly a usable unit. And as I say, they do take out enemy heroes quite effectively, and they can be quite fun to use when you get that charge off. But generally, I think there are better things out there at the moment in their current state. But anyway, that's all I've got time for today. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, let me know what you think in the comments down below, and of course subscribe to the channel for a lot more Conqueror's Blade content. Thanks for watching, guys, and I shall see you all on the next video.